Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Slowpreneur. Thank you so much for being here for another episode in season 2. I'm Stephanie Pellet, and I am so excited about the interview that I'm bringing you today. I was lucky enough to speak with Ashley Beaudin, the Gentle Business Coach, about her unique and beautiful approach to running a business. I was honestly blown away by some of Ashley's ideas around how we can introduce more care and compassion and ultimately safety into the process of running our businesses, not just for our clients, but also for ourselves. Ashley was super generous in sharing about her story and the lessons and wisdom that she's learned along the way. And I just feel so honored that she shared it with us in this interview. So without further ado, let's dive right in and learn from Ashley about gentle business. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to talk to you. Uh, Everything you're doing in the world is so amazing. So I'm really excited we get the chance to sit down and connect.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I'm so honored to sit down with you.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. So, for those who don't know you, we'll start with the introduction. I always like to tell people this is the opposite of an elevator pitch. We are not interested in you having to convince us or explain really quickly, but we do want to get to know you and who you are. So, can you tell us a little bit about you and your business, the Gentle Business Coach?
Yes, I can. So I'm Ashley. If we haven't met, hi. I I really just help people cultivate more gentle businesses that they can feel safe inside of, businesses that feel more like care and less like force. And I have been doing my own thing and business for the last almost 9 years. And the one thing that I love about it is I love the ability to do so many different things, the capacity to prioritize my well being is super important to me. Um, I live in Ottawa, Ontario, and I have a cat that I'm obsessed with named Theo.
Theo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my dog just perked his head up at the
I
name
saw
of
that.
your cat. Maybe he wants to be friends. Well, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing a little bit about that. I would love to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Everything you said, it sounds so juicy. Businesses we feel safe inside of, businesses that feel more like care than force. All of that is so beautiful. So, when it comes to gentle business, can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about what you consider to be a gentle business, how you define that? I'm guessing some of those definitions you just explained, but
Yes.
yeah, what does gentle business mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the very core of it is that gentle business is really designing a business that prioritizes your sense of safety and your sense of care, and then let that informing how your business is set up, the ways that you market, the things that you offer. It is, I would say, almost like a ruthless um, commitment to self.
Mm. I love that you use the word ruthless when we're talking about gentle business, but it's not a contradiction.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that. I sometimes talk about that like mama bear energy when it comes to
Yeah.
self care, like really fierce energy, but that it's also in service of care, it's in service of self, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So I just really find that so beautiful, that idea of ruthless commitment to gentle business.
Mm.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I feel like usually we use ruthlessness against ourselves, not
Mm.
for ourselves. It's a ruthless self criticism, it's a ruthless self doubt. Um, but that function of ruthlessness and sort of what you're speaking to, could it actually be in um, care and protection and love for self? You know how to be ruthless, but why don't you try being ruthless for you?
Mm. Oh, such a powerful idea. That is so fascinating. Fascinating. And I love hearing you talk about safety too. I feel like that's a word that comes up a lot in your work, both when you're talking
Yeah,
about the spaces that you create and the things that you try to do to create safety. But you had a recent post about how safety is something that's actually created within, for each person. It can't be
yeah,
something that we guarantee for others.
yeah,
But for you, what does that speak to? So you're talking about feeling safe within your business. Maybe for people who aren't as familiar with this concept, this is the first time they're hearing about the idea that we could feel safe within our businesses. What are some of the ways that we sometimes feel unsafe? Maybe that's a more illustrative way to
right.
talk about it.
Yeah. So a big thing with this is, well, I'll tap this a little bit into my story. I would say I had a little bit of a reckoning, I would call it,
Mm,
in late 2019, just before the global reckoning of
yeah.
COVID. Um, I had run 2 large events, camps, and
Yes.
they, on the outside, did really well. On the inside, behind the scenes, did not do well, just like from a
Mm,
financial standpoint, etc. And my business was sort of crumbling, and it was kind of like a bit of a reckoning moment of like, what am I like, what am I doing, and what am I
mm,
building that's actually sustainable? How am I ever going to keep this thing going? And seeing like, it's that dichotomy of seeing like, of like, people coming to you and being like, my life has changed forever because of your work. And then at the same time holding this sense of, I I love that, but I don't know how to hold that and keep that going in a way that actually I still feel, um, cared for, and I still feel well. And I think this is a big thing for a lot of people who maybe resonate more with being, um, people that are like big visionaries or like big feelers, like just they're all
mhm,
in it for the heart. And that was me. And so at that point, I had to move through a lot of different things and make a lot of different financial moves. And I actually did this exercise, which I'm always like coming up with these things and I don't know where I get them from, but I just rolling with them. So I had
love
this
it.
exercise of like, I wrote down all the bad things that had ever happened to me in my business.
Yeah.
Um, like just like hard things, things that were painful, things that brought stress. And at this point, I had been, maybe 7 years. And so I just wrote them all out. And then I so clearly started to see patterns that the same things kept happening over and over and over again. And it was like someone like turned on the light in the room, and I said to myself, I don't feel safe in my
Mm,
business. And the reason why these things keep happening is because I don't feel safe. Um, and if I acknowledge that I don't feel safe, then obviously it brings about the question, well, what would help me feel safe? What does it actually even mean, or what does it look like or feel like to feel safe in a business? And how has no one ever in all these years ever asked me the question of, do you even feel safe in your work?
mm,
And because when you don't feel safe in your work, that's how you get into these sort of things around self-protective mechanisms that keep happening over and over again, or stories from childhood replaying over and over again, living out of traumatic experiences instead of out of self-leadership, etc. And that was definitely my story, and that moment really changed, I guess, my approach, just even personally my approach to my business, and the realization that something really needed to change.
mm. That's a really powerful story. I think one thing that you're getting at here too is about recognizing that our businesses not only have an impact externally on the people we work with, on the world, on our culture, but they also have such a tremendous impact internally.
Yeah.
And I think what you're speaking to is the fact that that internal cost or internal sense of safety or internal intentionality is not always prioritized, discussed, even acknowledged as something that can and should be paid attention to. And I think it's hard because you're talking about people who are extremely heart-centered, who are so invested in their impact in the world. I mean, Imperfect Bosses is how I first heard about you and your work and the ripple effect it was having and the people that you were assisting and the connections that were being formed. And for all intents and purposes, from the outside, it looks like this beautiful, intentional, wonderful experience. So
Mm-hmm.
to hear you talk about the fact that for you it was not the same experience, I think is a really important story to tell. I think for entrepreneurs who are maybe just starting out or who are used to only seeing these success stories everywhere
Right.
around them, how do we start to like pull apart the fact that the external vision or external impact does not always match up with the internal one, and that sometimes we have those delusions about things,
Yeah.
oh, that looks like the most
Mm-hmm.
incredible thing, but not recognizing that the impact on the inside may not match what it looks like on the outside.
Yeah, 100%. There's like, I mean, I still see this all the time. Sometimes, I mean, I think it even shows up with friends. I'll be like watching their
Yeah.
stories, and I'll be like, "Wow, they're having an amazing day," and then they're like texting me and being like, "This is the worst day of my life," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Or like, "I thought
Yeah.
you were making so much money, or like selling out," and it's not even that you said that. It's just like I'm picking it up on my own perceptions and interpretations. And then they're
Yeah.
like, I really need to like bring in another client. And I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
it's real. And I think it's like, it's from both, like both our almost our feeling of like, I mean, I think this is an interesting topic just in sales. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you almost like need to look busy and then you'll seem like it'll be easier to make the sale. Versus if you're like, well, I have no clients, like someone hire me, I'm looking for
Right.
one. That's not going to sell as well as if you're like, I'm booked out, like get in quick.
Totally. But it's that contradiction because we don't want to perpetuate these stories, right? Either we don't want to be inauthentic
I know.
and show up in a way that we're not actually feeling. But you're right, it's sort of this catch 22 sometimes. And actually this conversation is really reminding me of, I know Brene Brown has this line in Braving the Wilderness where she talks about how it's hard to hate someone up close, but this is making me think
Mm,
also it's hard to like worship someone up close, or it's hard to be jealous of someone up close, because you're right, like the things that save me and the things that make me feel, oh, like I'm not weird. Like if I'm struggling to get clients right now, that's not just a 100% individual thing that I need to just work hard
yeah,
and do more, etc. When I'm texting my friends, I can know that I'm not alone. When I'm in my community with other entrepreneurs who are all experiencing the same kind of market forces and
yeah,
recession and wild things happening in the world, I can know that we are connected more than we know, right? And
right.
so I don't know, that's just making me think of how community is such an important
Hmm.
piece of how we stay true to ourselves and keep going with this way of looking inward and checking in with how we're actually feeling. Because if we're only looking at the outsides of other people's lives, I feel it's kind of inevitable that we're going to push ourselves to be exactly like them or to show up in the ways that
Hmm.
they're showing up, which might not be accessible to us in a given moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's just a real dynamic to acknowledge being in a social media drenched world.
Yeah. But connection, I think, is the answer. True connection, like the
Yeah.
conversation we're having right now, getting to know you better, is going to make it easier for me to be like, wow, she's a real person. She also goes through things. It's not just post after post on Instagram that is fire emoji 3 times in a row. You know what I'm saying? Although everyone follow Ashley on Instagram because your posts have been incredible. And I'm going to talk about some of them.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I wanted to kind of circle back and just, if you're comfortable sharing, what were some of those patterns that you noticed when you did that sort of internal audit of all
Mhm.
the things that had gone badly in your business? What were some of those things that came up again and again for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a big one for me has been not giving things time. So
Mm,
moving on quickly. Suddenly
mm,
being like, end this, end this now. I got to get out of this. Um,
mm,
or, you know, which I always say to people, like, um, the pace of safety is slow.
mm.
The pace of
Yeah.
self-protection is fast. And so
Mm,
if you're suddenly moving fast, there's often a self-protective thing at play. And that was always like, especially if it's like a fast decision, like all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, my relationship is over. It needs to end today. Um, it's like a sure sign, like something's coming in there and being like, you don't feel safe and let me help you. So that was a big one for me. Number two was not prioritizing profit at all. Um,
mm.
prioritizing my almost prioritizing my the impulse of a great idea or getting swept up in the enthusiasm of a dreamy vision more than I would ever consider profit. And I actually think that those two can work in tandem together. But what was happening for me was I was like 99% idea,
Yeah.
dreamy vision, and really taking a wing it, like I'm just gonna wing it approach.
Mm.
Um, the joke I always have with people is that I'm an underthinker. Most people are overthinkers. I'm underthinker. I'm like, jump now, think about it later. It'll work
Yeah.
out. I trust. Um, and there can be a gift in that of um, I'm able to like learn things quickly and like really see if it's gonna work. But um, I did that a lot at the beginning of my business. I would say
Mm.
those would probably be the two highest, and then the third one would just relational stuff. I mean, like business is relationships, and um, whether it's like friendships, peer relationships, coaches or mentors you hire, or um, the clients and customers you have. There was a lot of repeating in that for me, and I think that has a lot to do with attachment. Um,
Mm.
which is a really fascinating topic that I don't think we explore enough
Yes.
when it comes to business.
Oh my gosh, this is going in so many amazing directions.
No.
I don't think we explore attachment when it comes to business at all. So I would love to talk about that. But yes, I just want to sort of underscore your point about profit and just kind of normalizing for everybody that that is something we are taught. We were talking about this in our legal self-care workshop the other week. Sharon was talking about this idea that a lot of us, when we get into online business, it's through a coach or teacher who
Hmm.
is trying to teach us, okay, the quickest way to get your business up and running, right? The fastest way to do all these things. But their best interest a lot of times is just kind of moving you through the course, right? They want to remove as many barriers as possible to you starting this business. And her point was like, well, that's kind of why they don't touch on the legal side, which is such an important protective factor, right? When
Yeah.
you're having a business, protecting your intellectual property, protecting your work, protecting your relationships. So her point was more around legal, but I think a similar thing, a similar point could be made here where it's more about the idea. Just start, right? Just do it. Just kind of create this event. Think about it later. Like jump in the net will appear. We've seen all of these
Yes.
motivational memes and ideas, and it kind of comes back to that idea for me of these people are trying to encourage us, and they may not have malicious intentions. They
Yeah,
may just want to see more businesses in the world. However, sometimes we forget to stop and think about what are those underlying pieces that are going to make us feel safe. And for sure, profitability, financial
mhm,
sustainability, those are all extremely important factors in allowing us to stick with things for the long term, right? I mean,
definitely.
you weren't able to sustain that event. That's a perfect example, right? For
Mhm,
for reasons both personal and profitable, that was not a sustainable thing. And
mhm.
so I think it's just such an important piece of the puzzle that we really don't talk about enough, because we're so focused on like your gifts, your creativity, your offers, your things. But where are we talking about the strategy of how can that actually support us in keeping things going? Not to mention, do not get me started on all the advice of just indiscriminately double your prices, triple your prices,
Right.
whatever, which is really, I think, harming people more than it's helping them. I'm all for people charging enough to make a living. That's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just telling everyone a blanket statement that they need to double their rates when they may not even be getting their first client, or they're still
Right.
new and they need to kind of try things, or they need experience, or they need great testimonials or whatever, like that advice is not going to work for everyone. It's going to work for a very
Yeah.
specific person who maybe is undercharging. But we just see these same memification, I think, of online business
Yeah.
happening in so many ways
Yeah, that's a
that
good word for
I
it.
think harms us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge thing too with the only type of person that can double or triple rates are people who have what I would say, a pretty privileged nervous system.
Mm.
Like one of
Tell
the
us more
big
about that.
issues I think with making mass price leaps is that people, for most of us, our nervous system can't hold selling at such a shift in price,
Mm.
which is why I will always recommend like more incremental price jumps, because if it's too much for you to hold, for your nervous system to feel safe selling it, well, then obviously you're gonna sell less no matter what, because you're gonna
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm scared to say the price, whatever. Um, it's just like you're not considering you're either not considering the wholeness of the individual, or two, you're assuming that they have a fairly unscathed nervous system, which I would say is not the majority of people.
Mm, I love that reframe. I often give similar advice, and I say it more of like you have to be able to stand behind it, because
Right.
energy doesn't lie. And if people can tell that you're uncomfortable with it, then that's going to come through
Yeah,
no
of course.
matter how
Yeah.
many nice things you say in the sales call. But I think the nervous system reframe is so fascinating, and something I would love to hear you talk more about, just nervous system care in general in business.
Mm.
I think you had a post recently about like predictability and creating
Mhm.
more predictability in business, and how that can be so nourishing for our nervous system. So
Yeah.
I would just love to hear you riff a little bit on like how your nervous system comes into play, and if you can share more about maybe the things that
Mhm.
you see in people when it
Yeah.
comes to their nervous system, because that phrase of having a privileged nervous system is not one I've heard before, but it's
Yeah.
immediately very
I've
powerful.
actually never said it before, but
Ah.
like that's why I like hesitated for a sec, because I was like, is this a good thing to say? But I think it's true.
Yeah.
Um, it's what I would really love to see more and more are, like, I think just more and more in general, specifically among online business, is business coaches and business strategists that have known many different kinds of nuances, whether that, has been, different traumas or coming from the background, or neurodivergence or stuff with the nervous system, that can hold space and understand a much more nuanced perspective than
Yeah.
these more blanket statements that we usually see. Um, and so for me, like, my nervous system is super sensitive, and
Mm.
I actually did an assessment on my nervous system um,
Mm.
last spring, which ultimately for me led into um, my diagnosis of autism. And for me, it was like there's something like going on here, and I think that there it's I think this thing with the nervous system is like when you don't really know what it means, or like don't understand like maybe these different um stress states, etc., in the sympathetic nervous system, or understand like your window of tolerance, or your ability to move yourself in and out of stress. Like, a lot of things just get labeled as other things. Like, they get labeled
Mm.
as like you just interpret them based on the information that you know. So growing up, it was like, oh, like, I'm lazy, or I am um, always tired, or I am anxious, I have anxiety, I'm depressed. And all of those things can be true. Um, but then when you start looking at the nervous system and start identifying and understanding how these different states show up in your body, or like what states you're prone to, or what are the things that really pull you out of your nervous system, like in terms of like that optimal zone, like what really starts to make you feel stressed, and really understanding that, like, not from like a conceptual basis, but really understanding that for yourself. So I'll give you like a really easy example of this. um
Sure.
so my I know for me, like, a lot of things like are based on things that I've experienced, right? Um, so my nervous system goes into a total flurry if like someone I have a direct message on Instagram from someone that I don't know,
Mm.
and it's I just see the beginning, and it starts like, oh no, like this might not be nice. That's gonna
Oh
send
no.
me into like,
Yeah.
total panic, total stress. Um, if I Even for me, if I get a call from a number I don't know, um,
Hmm.
if I have like a day where I'm just like looking at money, and feeling like there's like panic and stress that might like dysregulate me.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and one of but for a long time, like, I didn't understand. I understood these things stressed me out, but I didn't understand the different impacts that it was having on my body. And so now I'm like, I pay attention so much. So I feel like I know so much more than I even did a year ago. And yeah, I mean, to really get into the nervous system education is a whole other thing. But I think I started noticing that big cue for me was um, that when I'm starting to like shut down, um,
Mm.
and sort of maybe dissociate from my business, or just feel numb, is like I start to get like, I feel cold. It's like
Mm.
my first instinct cue that like it's happening. I'm getting cold. Like, it's just like the sensation of like, I'm getting cold, I'm sleepy, and like, put me under a blanket and let me curl up on the couch. And that is a sensation that lets me know, okay, something has caused me stress and has moved me out of that optimal zone where I feel safe and secure. Um,
Mm.
Also identifying that like there are things that I think this just brings nuance to safety, because there are things that, like, in my mind, I'm fine with. I feel like if someone,
Mm.
like, a good example of this is if someone disagrees with me on a point that I make on a social media post, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, cool, open to it.
Good for you.
But my body is like, oh
Mm.
no, delete, block, get them out of here. I'm never posting again.
Yeah.
shut it all down. And
Such, yeah.
so I think too that was a massive realization for me, that just because your mind is okay with something, just because your mind is like, yeah, let's go, just because your mind thinks you have capacity, does not mean your body and nervous system are on the same page. And at the end of the day, your body and nervous system are going to sort of rule the roost. Because
Yeah.
if you go ahead with it and you're like, yeah, I feel good about this project, and you say you take it on, but then your body and nervous system is like, no, 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 no. That's going to show up in so many different ways to really hold you back from delivering on this thing that your mind was like, yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, your body is the boss, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah,
because you can overpower your body for so long,
right.
but then at a certain point, no bueno anymore, and your body will be like, no, we're going to bed for the next week. We've
Yeah.
all experienced something like that, right? Pushing through. But I really, really appreciate this conversation that we're having, because I think, speaking of memes in the online business world, we've all heard the one of, get out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
And I'm sure that one drives you bananas.
Hmm.
So do you want to speak to that a bit? Like, what's your perspective on the comfort zone? And
Yeah.
because what you're saying is we want to keep ourselves within a place where we feel optimal and
Hmm.
we do feel comfortable. And I think some people would think that that means we're not going to be growing if we're believing all the memes we read online. But I don't believe that. You don't believe that. So myth bust that for us, Ashley.
Yes. Yes, I'm really not on board with the get outside your comfort zone, and it is rampant.
Hmm.
I mean, people have it like in their Instagram bios,
For
and
sure.
we just see it everywhere that like if you want to grow, like you have to get outside the comfort zone, or you have to get
Have
uncomfortable.
goals that scare you.
Yeah, yeah. And I one just don't agree with it because I think that we have to acknowledge that one, if you have to deprive yourself of comfort in order to grow, that's not true growth. That's usually, it's going to be like performative, like it might last for a little bit of time. It's not a sustainable level of growth. um or it's just like, yeah, it's just kind of like a flash in the pan. um
Mm.
and that in our like biology, in our bodies, that we need comfort to grow. The example that I really give a lot, and I had given in that post, was if we think about children, and when they grow, we give more comfort. Kids need more comfort in order to feel safe and secure so that they can grow. They can grow not just physically, but emotionally and relationally and spiritually. If a child doesn't feel safe in the home, it's going to be really hard for them to grow. So it's so interesting to me that when we get older, there runs this rampant message that suddenly it's the opposite. That if you
Mhm.
want to grow, then you have to strip yourself of all comfort. And I think it speaks to probably a greater thing of people, um, of we don't really truly know how to truly comfort ourselves. That comfort itself has somewhat been equated to laziness, or I even think of like emotional eating, or
Mm.
like it's like something that you need to get rid of. But to understand and acknowledge that we as human beings thrive off comfort, and we are very well deserving of comfort and care, um, is so important. And I think that, so then the question becomes like, okay, whatever, Ashley, but then like if that's true, like then like I'll never like try new things or whatever because I'm prioritizing my comfort zone. Um and by saying all this, like I'm not saying don't lean into hard things, don't try new things. But when you do lean into hard things and when you do try new things, what is your plan to meet yourself with comfort and care in that process? Because now you've accepted that you need that. It's actually part of the strategy of growth. Comfort isn't the enemy of growth, it's the strategy for growth. Um,
Yeah.
and then also being much more intentional and realistic about, okay, I want to grow in this area or I want to try this new thing. I'm just going to lean into it a little bit. Like, I don't
Mm,
have to overload or overwhelm myself with stress to grow.
right. Right. It reminds me of working out, right?
Right.
Lifting weights. Like you do have to put yourself in a little bit of discomfort, but you don't go from lifting 5 pounds to lifting 50 pounds from one day to the next. You do it little by little and your
Yeah.
body adapts in that comfort zone. You're maybe at the top end of your comfort zone, right? Or at the bottom
Yes.
end, whatever way we want to frame that. You're pushing yourself a little bit, but you're actually going to progress faster if you are then also taking care of yourself, taking breaks, drinking water, having the right food, you know, all of those things will actually support you in getting to that growth that you ultimately want, not forcing yourself to just suddenly expand 10x your results, as it were.
Yeah, I think like to just like sort of give an example of what this can look like in business. Like when people say like growth is outside your comfort zone. That's when you see a lot of different advice come in that's like extreme. Like, "Oh, you're afraid of being on video? Show up on video every day for 100 days." Or like, "Oh, you're not making enough money? Quadruple your prices." Um, like little things, like those types of examples would probably be like the comparison of the workout one in terms of online business. Um, and the wild thing to me though is because we're like laughing about it now, but people spew this out as legitimate advice, and
Every
people
day.
believe it and get harmed in the process, and then feel shame because it was hard for them, or something happened, or whatever, they couldn't do it. But they're actually the problem actually has nothing to do with them. The problem has to do with the advice and the demonizing of the comfort zone.
Yeah. Oof, it's a big conversation because I do think that that advice, it's coming from a place where there's a little tiny bit of truth to it, that the more
Sure.
you do something, the more you become comfortable with it. Fine. True. But I think what you're saying is if we're compromising our sense of safety or our nervous system or our regulation in the process, that it may actually backfire and it may actually lead to more burnout or more severe, fear of showing
Mhm.
up online, or just an avoidance, for example, in that particular situation. So I think it's really important to be having this conversation, to be reminding people that if you are sort of nervous about something, it doesn't mean that you have to then turn around and like squash that fear by doing it, times 100. You can gently increase your capacity
Yeah.
by creating safety. And I think, coming back to attachment full circle here, when you were talking about what kids need to grow, and we think about, I'm not a mom, but when we think about attachment and we want kids to be securely attached, what makes kids feel securely attached is having more connection with their parental figure and more nervous system regulation from their
Mhm.
parent or guardian. That makes them more independent. It makes them more strong. It makes them more able to go away and then come back and still feel regulated the whole time. So I
Mhm.
just love this analogy when it comes to business, of the more that we can care for ourselves and give ourselves what we need, both internally in our businesses and also in the impact we're having in the world, we can be more secure, we can be more confident, right?
Yeah.
I was just talking about this recently. Like this year, I've been really trying harder to take care of myself outside of my business. And it's been so cool to see how that translates directly into
Mhm.
more creativity, more desire to show up online and connect with people, more opportunities. But last year when I was forcing it and I felt so burnt out and I was like, but I have to show up in this way. I have to, keep putting things
Mm,
out there. It was drawing from an empty tank. So not that I'm saying we should take care of ourselves so that we can be more
right.
productive and creative, but it is this really wonderful side effect that happens
Totally.
when we do that counterintuitive thing and kind of take a bit of a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to hear anything that you do to take care of your nervous system, specifically your routines, your rituals,
Mm,
practices, grounding, things that you do in your business
hmm.
and outside of your business to care for yourself.
Yeah. It's actually funny we're having this conversation today because it's actually like it's been a rockier nervous system day.
Okay.
So, for example, if I wake up and I'm like, it feels like a rockier day. I'm feeling like maybe a little bit, shut down. This is what I did this morning. Like I'll have a cold shower.
Mm,
Um, using so that's a big thing I would say I use and I would highly recommend is using cold something. Cold shower, cold compresses, cold water on the face.
face plunge. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, cold drinks um can really help, specifically if you're really feeling like maybe a little bit outside of that optimal zone.
Hmm.
But in the general, like everyday things, um, I think what's important for me is I definitely have like a lot of rituals or routines that I do. So, like, I call them my gentle walks, being in nature, specifically looking at water. I also have a little bit of a fascination with the wind.
Mm.
um, just like watching movement in nature, um, and gentle, mindful movement of the body. Something else that really helps me is um, like anything that can really just make me aware and grounded in the present. I had a therapist years ago, um, and one of the ideas we came up with is like, what is something that I can hold in my hand that
Mm.
could be true of me now, but I would never have access to as a kid?
Mm.
And so, like, a big one of this is like if you have keys to like your house, car, apartment, you likely did not own a house, car, or apartment um, when you were a kid. If you did, it's a different story. Um, and so, just even I'm holding these keys in my hand. This is a reminder to me that I am not 7 or that I'm not 14.
Yeah.
I'm an adult. It is 2023, and um, I'm safe now. Can be a huge thing. I think that's the thing too, like, which just is a whole other conversation. We could probably have 7 million combos on this. Um,
It seems like we really could.
is that I know I looked at the thing and I was like, it's already 25 minutes. I feel like you only asked me one question. Anyway, um, is like the inner child running our business.
Mm.
This comes
Mm.
up with my clients all the time, and feeling like I don't want to be an adult. I don't want to do adult things. I think this really impacts profit, and why we see this be such an area for people is because like I don't want to be an adult. Like, can someone else take care of this for me? I don't want to look in numbers, etc. Um, so I mean that's like a whole other conversation. But when we look at practices like that, like um, or like if you think of like if you've registered your business and you can hold that paper in your hand or you can frame
Yeah.
it by your desk, it's a reminder of like it's 2023. I'm an adult. I can do this. I can trust myself in this. I'm safe. It's okay. So yeah.
So yeah, just casually blowing my ever-loving mind with this inner child running your business thing.
I know.
Holy moly, I'm gonna need to sit with that. I think a lot of people listening probably have to sit with that too. because I definitely recognize that
Yeah.
in clients and myself. That's a thing for sure. And I think for anyone listening who's like, woof, I think Ashley would probably say the answer is coming back to that same thing we've been talking about this whole time: giving yourself more comfort, giving yourself more regulation,
Yeah.
taking care of your nervous system, all of those things. And also speaking directly to your inner child with
Yeah.
those reminders, as you're saying, of like, we're okay, we can handle this.
Yeah.
We also gain that capacity. Business is such a beautiful, our friend Sonia says this, business is such a mirror, entrepreneurial
Yeah.
life is a mirror. And we can really kind of come at that pain, trauma, fear, whatever of our past from either addressing the past or addressing how we handle things now in the future. There's sort of like two ways in. And so if we remind ourselves and build that strength of capacity, I can do this, I did this hard thing, look at
Right.
look at the ways I'm taking care of myself, that is a way to care for ourselves in the past and in the
Yes.
present. And so I just think business can be this really amazing container to kind of work out some of those things, practice some of the skills that we want to get better at. And it's just literally endlessly fascinating how much it can teach us about ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, you're just continuing. My brain is just
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I
so
think
good.
that also just speaks to how beautifully, I mean, I totally am a proponent that like businesses can be a vessel of healing for us.
Mm,
But they can also be a vessel of harm.
for
And
sure.
I think that's why I'm so passionate about safety. Because if you
Mm,
can center safety in your business, it's like the sure shift that your business can now become a vessel of healing. Because
mm.
that's centered and that's set.
It's so beautiful. Ooh, just letting that land for a second.
Yeah.
Ashley, you're amazing. You're amazing. Okay.
Oh.
I am going to ask you some of the questions that I ask
Yes.
everyone at
Yes.
the end of my interviews.
Mhm.
These are about you. And then at the end, I'm also going to ask you to share more about what you're working on right now, where people can find you. But, woof, yeah, I can't introduce any more groundbreaking ideas right now because my brain will explode. And I think everyone needs to kind of have a moment with that. That's part of the comfort too, right?
Absolutely.
Introducing these things
Time to
slowly but surely.
process.
Time to process, so important. Okay, so let's move on to kind of the fun ones.
Yeah.
And these are the opposite of rapid fire. They're just, you're responding. You're responding in the time that you feel.
Okay.
So the first one is, how do you take your tea or coffee? Do you drink tea or coffee?
No, I don't. I don't drink tea or coffee.
Interesting. Okay, so subsidiary question, what is your favorite drink?
I am absolutely a fan of pop.
Which one?
I definitely drink a lot of Diet Coke. I'm that classic Diet Coke
I love Diet
entrepreneur.
Coke. Diet Coke is so trendy right now. It's like
I
in
know it's
every
really made a
YouTube vlog.
comeback.
It really has. Yeah, I think it's those Stanley cups that everyone has, and they're just like Diet Coke for days in those like enormous cups.
It's so funny. I literally have one right here.
You do? Amazing. Not sponsored, guys.
No, I don't work
As
with
if I could ever get a Diet Coke sponsorship. Uh, cool. Okay, that's a great answer. And I had a Diet Coke last night. I love it. It's such a great drink.
it.
What is the best thing you have read lately? The best book you've read lately?
Hmm. People love asking this question. They're
I
also
love
asking
asking
like,
this
"What are you
question because
reading?" or whatever. But I find my reading is very niche.
that's okay.
Well, the book I'm reading right now is there's a spiritual writer. His name is Henry Nouwen,
Okay.
and he's not alive anymore. But he, so you can't follow him on Instagram. So don't try. Um, but he so beautifully blends almost like psychology with contemplative spirituality.
Wow.
And he was a professor and was like an Anglican pastor, and then spent a lot of his final years in living intentionally, like in communities for the disabled. And
Wow.
I'm reading there's like a lot of books that you can buy. A lot of his books were not written as books, they were letters, diaries. And so I'm reading this one right now, and it's he went and stayed for 9 months in a monastery with monks
Wow.
to really like almost face what was happening inside of him and the questions um, and pain that was inside of him. And he talks a lot about like fear of rejection and being beloved and that type of thing. And there's obviously nothing like moving into a monastery to where there are literally no distractions to come face to face with your own humanity. So I've been really loving it.
Wow. That is such a good answer. I
Oh,
need to
thank you.
check that out. That sounds
Sometimes I
really
feel like my
interesting.
answers are so different, which I guess I shouldn't think that, but then I'm like, will anyone even be interested? But
I think that's the more interesting thing.
now that you say it, I can see it. But all this time, I was like, I'm not listening to, or I'm not reading, one of these trendy books.
That's okay. You're a trendsetter. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. This question always stumps people, so take your time. But
Oh no,
where
I've
is your
already been
favorite
stumped.
where is your favorite place in the world?
Hmm. Honestly, I think my favorite place in the world is right by my house. I have a very, I have a very serious attachment to the river here.
Mm.
I live about 3 blocks from one of the beaches in Ottawa, and which I mean, dreamy, right? But then also,
Super dreamy.
um, I really fell in love with the water during COVID, and I have this weird thing where it's like I go through a grief period in the winter because the thing about the river is that it freezes over,
Hmm.
and then it's a very emotional experience for me when it thaws. That it's now
Wow.
back, um, and that I can watch it and be immersed in it, and I had a moment like during COVID. I had this photo that I had posted of me in the river, and I don't even know, like it was just like luck of the draw, where I posted a selfie of me in the river, and the river caught the reflection of my face. So you see
Mm.
my face, and then right below see the reflection of my face in the river. And I wrote this caption that said, "In a time where I have not been held by human arms, I've learned to let the water hold me." Um, and that's when our bond began, and so anytime, like especially now, I'm just like waiting. I'm like just counting down the days for that. It's such a metaphor, I feel like, but for the ice to thaw, for the river to hold me once again. Um, it's probably my favorite place.
That's so beautiful. I'm a water person too. I am never happier than when I'm in or near water. So I
Yeah,
can definitely resonate with that. Beautiful.
it's a thing for sure.
And last but not least,
Okay.
what is a gift that you currently would like to buy yourself? Got
Um,
your eye on something.
the funny thing about this question is, I think there are two people in the world. There are people who buy themselves the thing they want as soon as they think of it, and
Yeah.
there are people who don't. And I'm the first one.
So then okay, amending the question, what is the most recent gift you bought yourself then?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Um, Probably some art.
Mm.
I'm working on a new gallery wall for my um bedroom. So
Ooh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure you have beautiful art. I can see the hanging behind you, and it's so gorgeous. So, yeah, sure, your art collection is amazing. Also, we realized recently we both have pink couches, pink velvet couches, and so
Yes.
I thought to myself, well,
Soul
we must have
sisters.
similar taste. Yeah,
I
soul
actually have
sisters. Yeah,
two, so.
you have two pink couches.
Mm-hmm.
Goals, literally goals. I saw a pink velvet armchair at the thrift store recently and I was like so tempted, but my partner is like, no more pink things. I'm like, we will negotiate on that point, but yes, okay.
Yeah, it's funny. If there's anyone listening who loves pink, there's and anyone also who loves reality TV, there's
Uh-huh.
a scene in one of the Love is Blind episodes when the guy goes into the girl's house and there's all this pink. Like pink coffee maker, pink chairs. And I'm like, I've never related to someone more.
That would be me if I had my druthers for sure. That would be
Yeah.
my entire aesthetic. Yeah. Okay, so Ashley, if people want to stay in touch with you, which they all do because you have changed our lives in this hour,
Amazing.
where can they find you? And also, what are you working on right now? What are you excited about?
Hmm. Well, I mean, definitely come find me on Instagram. Hopefully, I live up to the hype at Gentle Business Coach. Um, I would say like definitely go there if you wanna hang out with me. And then what I'm working on right now is I'm organizing a live event, an in-person event in September, just outside Ottawa, September 15th to 17th. Um, it's my first time doing an event since the reckoning. So I'm
Mm.
pretty excited about it and, just holding myself in that process and experience, but really excited to see what can be created in community. So
Mm-hmm.
you
The
can
gentle
sign up.
business.
There's a wait list if you go to my bio, or you can just like keep tabs on me.
Yeah. I will link to it in the show notes for sure. And I hope at some point you share kind of what you're doing differently with this event compared to the last ones. That would be fascinating
Yes,
to learn more about, because I'm sure you're doing so many things differently to make sure
totally.
it's as supportive as you as it is for others. So
Yeah.
really inspiring. Okay. Well, thank you, Ashley, so much. I cannot thank you enough for being here. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I am so excited to continue following along with what you're working on and stay connected. Thanks so much for listening to Slowpreneur. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend or reach out and let me know at hello@stephaniepellet.com. I would love to hear from you. As always, you can find show notes for this and all episodes at stephaniepellet.com/slowpreneur. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.